Breaking news into HQ. Game 3 of the NBA Finals in the books. The Denver Nuggets 109-94 winners over the Miami Heat. They get triple doubles from both Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, and beefy ones at that. That duo become the first pair of teammates each with a triple-double in an NBA Finals game. The Nuggets grab a 2-1 series advantage. Let's bring in Colin Ward-Henninger to get insight here. Michael Malone called out his team's effort after Game 2. I'd say they responded. Your takeaways from Game 3?
Yeah, effort, absolutely. And I think execution is really the key term, particularly in that first half. You didn't see as many miscues defensively, and that is really what the difference was between Game 2 and Game 3. The Nuggets lost so many shooters in that Game 2, giving Max Strus open looks, giving Gabe Vincent open looks. You didn't see that in Game 3, and when you limit those surrounding players on the Miami team, it forces Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo to do very heavy lifting. And as you saw, Jimmy Butler had a good start. He was taking advantage of mismatches when he could, but Bam Adebayo didn't have a good shooting night, and Butler can't do it all himself. The Miami Heat just didn't get enough from their role players, and you saw the Nuggets, their two big stars, just absolutely came to play with those monster triple doubles, and that was really the difference in the game.
Hey, we mentioned the triple doubles from both Jokic and Murray. Jokic becomes the first player ever in the finals with a 30-20-10 game. He had 4 assists in Game 2, but they spread the wealth with regards to the offense in this game. Is this the way you're accustomed to seeing the Nuggets play, at least when they're successful?
Yeah, this is the way the Nuggets want to play. Nikola Jokic, as great of a scorer he is, as great as he is in the low post, as great of a shooter he is, he wants to pass the ball. He wants to be a facilitator, and that's when the Nuggets are at their best. So really what the difference was is Jamal Murray did not get off to a good start in Game 2, partly because Jimmy Butler was guarding him. This time around in Game 3, Jamal Murray got off to a hot start. That means the Heat even had to start trapping him, having to start create extra opportunities for Jokic in the middle in 4-on-3 situations, and you are absolutely playing with fire if you're asking him to do that. So Jokic scored when he had to. He sensed in the third quarter maybe his team was a little flat, went out and got a bunch of buckets, got back to that passing and spread offense that they're so good at. So this is absolutely the blueprint if you're the Denver Nuggets, and it's up to the Miami Heat to try to figure out a way to try to stop Jamal Murray, which in turn they can try to make Jokic a scorer like they did in Game 2.
Yeah, you mentioned it, and Eric Spoelstra was kind of bristled at the notion after Game 2 with respect to Jokic becoming a big scorer, and then the others around him they kind of contain. When Jamal Murray scores 34 points and Jokic does what he customarily does on this night, 32, can you beat the Denver Nuggets?
It's really, really hard. And what you can't do is allow guys like Christian Braun to go out and have 15 points, getting it on back cuts, on layups, on dunks. Those are the types of things that you have to prevent. It's easier said than done. If you're double teaming Jamal Murray and you're preventing the outlet pass from going to Jokic, you're playing 3-on-2, and that's why all those lanes in the basket is open on the backside. So it's a very difficult task. With Jamal Murray makes such difficult shots that you look at the Heat defense and you can't say that they made a bunch of mistakes. They're playing pretty well. They're playing physical. They're clearly well schooled, and they're executing their coverages. It's just sometimes Murray is that good and that dynamic of a scorer that he is going to beat great defense. And then once he gets going, what do you do to stop him, and what are the ripple effects? So in short, if they're going to both go out and get 30-point triple doubles, I don't see the Heat winning this series. But there are things that they can do to try to at least limit the role players around them if these two are going to have huge games.
Yeah, you get 15 from a rookie who hit 7 of his 8 shots from the floor. You mentioned Christian Braun. From Miami's standpoint, the way they played this game in their return from home, Miami had been very good in Game 3s. Denver, a really good road team in this postseason. What counter do the Heat have to have in the next game to get even in this series?
Yeah, it sounds pretty silly, but they need to make shots. I mean, this is kind of a mirror image of Game 1, right? Like Miami had some decent looks. They just couldn't go down. Really what the difference was to me, I think that Bam Adebayo was so good in Games 1 and 2. I think that we kind of started taking that for granted. Okay, they have Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. They're both going to show up every night. Bam Adebayo had a big statistical game in Game 3, but he did not shoot the ball well. And if he's going to shoot 30% from the field, Denver's going to take that every single time. And the fact that they didn't have a third scorer was very apparent in Game 3 for Miami. Gabe Vincent had a terrible game. Max Strus had a terrible game. They are missing Tyler Hero. That's a guy that if he is able to come back in this series, you see the type of impact that he could have if he can be that third guy to come in and say, hey, let me take some of the load off of Bam and off of Jimmy and go out there and actually get some buckets, because Miami isn't playing bad defense despite the gaudy numbers from Jokic and Murray in Game 3. I think they're happy with this 104 to 110 range. They just need to score more. And whether that comes from a guy like Hero or comes from the role players stepping up in different games, I think that's what they're going to need in Game 4.
Yeah, you touched on it. To back that point, Bam, 7 of 21 from the floor. Vincent and Strus, and Vincent's been a big player for them in this postseason, combined 3 for 17. Is that Denver just digging in on the defensive end?
A little bit of both, right? Like, they did miss some good looks, but it's because they were able to take away those easy ones that they got at the beginning of Game 2 in particular. When Denver is locked in defensively and they're communicating well in their switches, that was a point of emphasis for Michael Malone, to communicate. And that would eliminate a lot of the mistakes that they saw at the beginning of Game 2. And you saw that in Game 3. There weren't those blown coverages that led to wide open three-pointers. And if you can contain those guys in the early going, they aren't the Jamal Murray types, right? That'll see one go in and suddenly they're all going in. Generally, if they don't get off to good starts, it's hard for them to get the ball rolling. And then that's what relies more on their traditional scorers. So Denver did lock in absolutely defensively, but there is just going to be some shooting variance. And that's what the Heat have really depended on throughout this postseason run.
Yeah, Colin, you get 50 combined points from Bam and Jimmy Butler, despite the fact that the field goal percentage might have been very high. But when you get 50 from them combined, who's the third guy that needs to kind of step up on Miami's end to give them a shot in Game 3?
Yeah, I think it has to be a guy who can create their own shot. So it has been Gabe Vincent in the first 2 games, because he's not the most prolific one-on-one scorer, but with his step backs, with his ability to hit mid-range, occasionally get to the basket, that's the type of guy who can go out and get you 19, 20 points in a game. Ultimately, they don't really have another guy like that on the roster. If you want to say Kyle Lowry, maybe hit us with one of those throwback games at some point during the series, he could be that third guy. But that's really the limitation of this Heat roster. Without Tyler Hero, they don't have a guy who can just go out and get you buckets. So we'll see if that hand is healing, if that wrist is healing, and he can get to the point where he can get on the floor, because I think there's a lot of talk, like, if Tyler Hero is able to come back, should they bring him back? The Heat are playing so well. Why would they want to mess with a good thing? I think Game 3 showed us that they need a guy like Tyler Hero and his skill set if they're going to be able to keep up with this Denver Nuggets offense.
It's hard to think they can if Nikola Jokic plays like this. He's been a monster in these playoffs. He was a monster in Game 3. First 30-20-10 game ever in the finals. He's Colin Ward-Henninger. Colin, we appreciate the insight. This is what the schedule looks like. Game 4 comes Friday, again in South Florida, before the venue shifts back a mile high to Denver for Game 5. Nuggets lead the series 2-1 after both Jokic and Murray turn in 30-point triple-doubles in Game 3.